The Sunoco on Route 119 never fully closes. That's the thing about truck stops in coal country. They breathe on a different clock than the rest of the world. 18-wheelers roll in at 2 a.m., reeking of diesel and distance. Night shift clerks restock energy drinks beneath fluorescent lights that hum like they're tired of it. And in the far corner of the parking lot, where the asphalt cracks into gravel and the gravel surrenders to weeds, a rust-pocked 1998 Ford F-150 sits exactly where it sat yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that. Eldon Voss has lived in that truck for 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days. Not that he counts anymore. He's 54 years old, and he moves like a man 10 years older. Knees stiff from sleeping folded across a bench seat. Back kinked from a posture no chiropractor would endorse. His beard has gone the color of wood ash. His army-issue duffel, the one he brought home from his second tour in Iraq, is wedged between the passenger seat and the glove compartment, holding most of what he owns. 2 changes of clothes, a plastic bag of toiletries, a VA paperwork folder fat with forms he's already filed and refiled, and a photograph of a man standing in front of a tree line so thick and green it looks painted. Every morning follows the same liturgy. Eldon wakes before the sun. Old habit. Older than the army, even. The way his father used to say the land doesn't wait on sleepers. And he rolls his shoulders 3 times each. Left, then right. The way the VA physical therapist showed him back in 2019 before the sessions ran out. He folds his blanket. He laces his boots. He walks into the Sunoco and buys a large black coffee for $1.89, using the coins he keeps in the cup holder. Crystal, the overnight clerk, never charges him full price anymore. She just nods and slides the cup across the counter, and he nods back, and neither of them makes it strange. By 7 a.m. he's usually gone from the lot, walking the 2 miles into downtown Harlan. Downtown being generous, a word borrowed from cities that deserve it more, to check the public library's computer terminals. He has a VA claim in some stage of processing. He's not sure which stage. The portal hasn't updated in 6 weeks. He refreshes it every morning with the grim focus of a man checking a wound. Harlan, Kentucky has a particular kind of beauty that people born there stop seeing after a while. The mountains come in close on every side, so close in places that the sky looks like a river running overhead. The Daniel Boone National Forest bleeds into the county's edges, and in fall, the hills go amber and scarlet, and the light turns the color of old bourbon. Eldon sees it. He never stopped seeing it, even after everything. That's one of the things that makes his situation difficult to explain to people who want a simpler story. He doesn't hate this place. He just has no place in it. He grew up 20 miles east, in a hollow called Cutter's Creek that doesn't appear on most maps. His father, Earl Voss, worked the mines for 30 years, and then, when his lungs made that impossible, turned to the land, 40 acres originally, then more as he bought out neighbors who were leaving for Cincinnati or Lexington. Earl Voss was a quiet man who believed in 2 things absolutely: hard work and the permanence of earth. People leave, he used to say. Land doesn't. Eldon joined the Army at 19, in 1991, in the first flush of Gulf War recruitment, when the whole thing still looked brief and clean from the outside. He did 1 tour, came home, worked for a logging outfit for 3 years, then re-enlisted in 2003 because the money was better, and because something in him was more comfortable with structure than without it. He did 2 tours in Iraq, came home the second time in 2008 with a Purple Heart, a knee that would need 2 surgeries, and a kind of ambient noise in his head that the VA would eventually label as moderate PTSD and treat with a medication that made him feel cottony and slow. His father died in 2014. Eldon was living in Lexington then, in a studio apartment, working security at a hospital. He drove back for the funeral, stood at the graveside in the hollow he grew up in, and then drove back to Lexington because he had a shift in 3 days and he needed the money. He didn't go through his father's papers. He assumed there was nothing. The mining company had bought most of Earl's land back years ago, or so Eldon had understood it. His father wasn't a man who talked about finances, and Eldon hadn't known enough to ask. The security job ended in 2021. Budget cuts. Eldon was the last hired, and so the first gone. He stayed in the apartment 3 months past the point he could afford it, burning through his savings with the systematic calm of a man who knows the fire is coming and just hasn't run yet. When the eviction notice arrived, he packed the duffel, put everything else in a storage unit he could pay for 2 more months, and drove south on I-75 because south was where he was from. And being from somewhere, even somewhere that didn't have a place for you, felt better than nowhere at all. He found the Sunoco lot by accident. He stopped for gas, sat in the truck, and didn't leave. That was 3 years ago. This morning is like every other morning, except that 2 miles away, in the small post office on Central Street, a man named Gerald Fitch is sorting the returned mail, the dead letters, the undeliverables, the ghosts. And he is holding an envelope addressed to a Eldon L. Voss. And something about the name makes him stop. He has seen this name before. He is almost sure of it. Gerald Fitch has worked for the United States Postal Service for 22 years, and in that time he has developed a philosophy about returned mail that most of his colleagues find eccentric. He believes every undeliverable letter is a failure of imagination, not logistics. The address didn't work. That doesn't mean the person doesn't exist. He's 51 years old, a compact man with reading glasses perpetually pushed up on his forehead, and the kind of patient, methodical energy that makes him excellent at his job and slightly exhausting at dinner parties. He lives alone in a house on Mound Street that he bought after his divorce, tends a vegetable garden that produces more tomatoes than one man can eat, and drives a 2009 Honda Civic that he maintains with religious devotion. He is not, by any measure, a dramatic person. He does not go looking for stories. But Gerald Fitch notices things. It's simply how he's built. The envelope in his hand is standard government issue, the kind the county records office sends. Cream-colored, with a return address from the Harlan County Clerk's office on Central Street, which Gerald passes every single day on his route. The front of the envelope carries a name and a Lexington address that no longer exists, and across the face of it, in red ink, is a rectangular stamp he knows by heart. Return to sender. Address not found. Unable to forward. What stops Gerald isn't the stamp. It's the fact that there are 2 previous stamps beneath it, slightly faded, the red gone pinkish with age. This envelope has come back 3 times. The oldest stamp is dated 2019, the second, 2022, and now this one, 2025, which arrived in the return pile last Thursday, and has been sitting in the undeliverable tray ever since. 3 attempts over 6 years. Gerald turns the envelope over. The county clerk's office sealed it each time and sent it back out. Whoever was inside that office kept trying, or the system kept generating the notice automatically, which is more likely, and somehow sadder. Eldon L. Voss. The name floats in Gerald's mind for a moment before it catches on something. He sets the envelope on his sorting table and walks to the break room, where the ancient desktop computer runs a routing software so outdated it still has a Windows XP startup sound. He doesn't use the routing software. He opens the browser and types the name into the Harlan County Online Records portal, a website built sometime around 2011 that looks it. The results load slowly. Gerald waits with his hands folded, the way he waits for everything. 2 records. A 1991 voter registration, address in Cutters Creek, and a property record, Parcel number 0047221B, listed under the name Earl T. Voss, deceased. Transferred to Eldon L. Voss, 2014. Gerald leans closer to the screen. The parcel size reads 200.4 acres. He sits back in his chair. He takes his glasses off his forehead and puts them on properly, as if that will change what the screen says. It doesn't. 200 acres in the eastern part of the county, assessed at current value. No liens, no delinquent taxes. Because the taxes, Gerald notices when he clicks deeper, have been quietly current. Paid automatically through some arrangement Earl Voss set up before he died. A small trust administered by a Pikeville attorney, whose name appears once in the record and then disappears. The land has been waiting. For 11 years, it has simply been waiting. Gerald prints the record. The printer jams twice, as it always does, and walks back to his sorting table. He holds the printout next to the envelope. Same name, same man. And somewhere between Lexington and here, that man fell out of the postal system entirely. No forwarding address, no P.O. box, no fixed location at all. Gerald is a rule-following man. He knows what protocol says. Log the return. File it with the undeliverables. Notify the county clerk's office that the addressee is unreachable, and move on. The system has mechanisms for this. Somewhere, eventually, a court would get involved. An attorney would file a motion, and the land would either be claimed or absorbed into county holdings. It could take another decade. It could take 2. He thinks about that for a long moment. Then he thinks about something his ex-wife used to say, back when she said things to him with warmth in them. Gerald, you know the difference between the rule and the reason for the rule. That's what makes you dangerous. She meant it as a compliment. Mostly. He picks up the envelope and slides it into the inside pocket of his jacket. He is not stealing it. He tells himself this clearly, because he is a man who requires precision in his own moral accounting. He is holding it. He will return it to the tray if nothing comes of this. But first, he's going to ask around, the way you do in a town this size, the way information moves in Harlan County, not through databases, but through the slow, reliable current of people who've known each other's families for generations. He starts at the Sunoco on Route 119 because 3 different people on his route have mentioned, in the offhand way people mention what they've normalized, that there's a veteran living in the parking lot. He's driven past the truck himself. He just never had a reason to stop. Today he does. He finishes his shift at 4:30 p.m. He doesn't go home first. He drives directly to the Sunoco, parks beside the rusted F-150, and sits for a moment looking at it. The cracked side mirror held on with electrical tape, the faded Army base sticker on the rear window, the sleeping bag visible through the glass like proof of a life being lived in the narrowest possible margin. Gerald gets out of the Civic. He walks to the driver's side window and knocks twice, gently, the way you knock on a door that belongs to someone. Inside the truck, Eldon Voss opens his eyes. Eldon Voss has learned, over 3 years of sleeping in a truck, to wake without startling. In the early months, it wasn't like that. Any knock, any footstep too close, and he'd be upright with his heart doing combat rhythms, hands braced against the steering wheel like the truck was going off a bridge. That's the PTSD math. The body doesn't know the war ended. It keeps running the old calculations. But time smooths even that, the way a river smooths glass. Now he surfaces slowly, like a man climbing out of deep water, and by the time he registers the 2 soft knocks on his window, he is already reading the situation with the flat, practiced calm of someone who has learned that most things aren't emergencies, and the ones that are, you can't stop anyway. The man outside the window is not a cop. Wrong posture, wrong energy. He's wearing a postal service jacket with the collar turned up against the October chill, and he's holding something in his left hand, and his face carries the particular expression Eldon has learned to recognize in people who are about to say something they practiced on the drive over. Eldon rolls the window down 2 inches. "Eldon Voss?" the man says. Nobody has said his full name in months, maybe longer. The VA portal shows it. Crystal at the counter knows his first name, but the combination, first and last, spoken aloud by a stranger with intention, lands differently than he expects, like being called back to something. "Depends," Eldon says. "My name is Gerald Fitch. I'm a mail carrier. I'm not here in any official capacity." He pauses, then adds, with the precision of a man used to accuracy, "I want to be transparent about that. I'm here because I found something that belongs to you, and I didn't think the right thing to do was let it disappear into a filing cabinet." Eldon looks at him for a long moment. Then he opens the door. They stand beside the truck in the cooling afternoon, the Sunoco's canopy lights flickering on as the sky dims, and Gerald hands him the envelope. Eldon takes it with the careful grip of someone who has handled a lot of documents that mattered. Discharge papers, medical forms, lease agreements that eventually expired. He looks at the 3 red stamps. Return to sender. 3 times. 6 years. He doesn't open it immediately. He reads the return address, Harlan County Clerk's Office. "Do you know what's in it?" he asks. "I looked up the parcel record," Gerald says. "I want to be honest with you about that, too. Your father, Earl Voss, he transferred land to you before he died. 200 acres, Eastern County. The notice has been trying to reach you since 2019. Eldon is quiet. The number doesn't compute at first, not because he doesn't understand it, but because understanding it requires reorganizing something fundamental about the story he's been telling himself for 11 years. The story where his father left nothing because there was nothing to leave. The story where he is a man without anchor points, drifting through the frictionless present, because that is simply the truth of his life and always has been. He opens the envelope. The letter is 3 paragraphs of legal language he has to read twice, but the meaning is simple. You are the registered owner of parcel 947221B, Harlan County, Kentucky. Please contact this office to confirm receipt and provide current contact information. His hands are steady. He notices this, notes it the way he notes everything about his own body now. Cataloging, monitoring, the perpetual self-surveillance of a man who doesn't entirely trust himself. But his mind goes somewhere else entirely. It goes back. Earl Voss wasn't a man who said much directly. That wasn't the way men from Cutter's Creek were built. Emotion traveled sideways in that culture, encoded in action, in gesture, in what you did rather than what you declared. Earl showed love the way he showed everything else, through work, through presence, through the slow accumulation of effort that added up to a life. Eldon remembers the summer he was 16, walking the back boundary of the property with his father. Earl pointing out landmarks the way other fathers might point out constellations. That white oak marks the northeast corner. Been there since before my grandfather's time. That creek bend, that's where the soil changes, goes clay-heavy, no good for crops, but you could run cattle on the high side. He remembers thinking, why are you telling me this? As teenagers do, as if the transfer of knowledge were a burden instead of a gift. Earl stopped at the edge of the tree line and looked out over the valley below, and said, without looking at Eldon, in the way that meant it mattered, "This'll be yours someday. Don't let anybody talk you out of it." Eldon was 19 when he enlisted. He never came back to live. And somewhere in the years between, he had rewritten that afternoon as a memory without consequence. Something his father said, one of those things fathers say, that the world eventually files under sentiment rather than fact. But Earl meant it literally. Earl always meant things literally. Eldon folds the letter back into the envelope. The fluorescent lights of the Sunoco canopy are fully on now, washing everything in that particular flat white that makes the world look like a waiting room. Gerald Fitch is watching him with the careful, non-intrusive attention of a man who understands that some silences need to be left alone. "He never told me," Eldon says finally. Not accusatory, just true. "Sometimes people think they have more time to explain things," Gerald says. Eldon nods once. It is not agreement, exactly. It is the smallest possible acknowledgement that another human being has said something accurate about the world. He puts the envelope in his jacket pocket, against his chest. "There's a county clerk's office," Gerald says, "on Central Street. I walk past it every day." "I know where it is," Eldon says. The Harlan County Clerk's office opens at 8:30 a.m. and closes at 4 p.m., a Monday through Friday, with a lunch break from noon to one that the sign on the door lists as optional, but the staff treats as sacred. It occupies the ground floor of a limestone building on Central Street that was constructed in 1923 and has the particular institutional smell of all old government buildings: paper, floor wax, and the faint ghost of cigarette smoke from decades when people still lit up indoors without apology. Eldon and Gerald arrive at 8:27 a.m. on a Thursday. They've barely spoken on the drive over. Gerald offered to drive. Eldon accepted without ceremony. They are not friends yet. That's not the right word for what they are. They are two men who have arrived at the same point from very different directions. And for now, that's enough of a foundation. Eldon is wearing his cleanest shirt, which is a gray flannel he's been saving without knowing he was saving it. He shaved in the Sunoco bathroom this morning using the last of a travel kit, and the face in the mirror was one he recognized but hadn't looked at directly in a while. He looked older than he remembered, and younger than he felt, which seemed about right. Gerald carries a manila folder. Inside it, the printed parcel record, the returned envelope with its 3 red stamps, and a handwritten timeline he made at his kitchen table the night before. Because Gerald Fitch is the kind of man who brings documentation to every encounter with a bureaucratic institution, on the principle that clarity is a form of self-defense. The clerk behind the counter is a woman named Donna Napier, 60-ish, with silver hair pinned up and reading glasses on a beaded chain. She has worked in this office for 19 years. She has seen people come in angry, confused, grieving, relieved, and occasionally all 4 at once. She looks at the 2 men standing at her counter, the postal worker with the folder and the weathered, quiet man beside him, and her professional instincts read the room immediately. This is not a routine transaction. "Good morning," she says. "How can I help you?" Gerald slides the parcel record across the counter. "We're here about this parcel. The registered owner is present and would like to confirm receipt of the transfer notice and update his contact information." Donna puts on her glasses and looks at the printout. Then she looks at Eldon. "You're Eldon Voss?" "Yes, ma'am." She holds his gaze for a moment, not challenging, just reading. Then she nods once and turns to her computer. What follows is 40 minutes of bureaucratic process that is tedious, and also, in its own understated way, quietly miraculous. Donna pulls the original file, physical, not digitized, a manila folder thick with documents going back to 1987, when Earl Voss first registered the expanded parcel. She lays papers on the counter one at a time, explaining each one in the flat, efficient language of someone who has done this 10,000 times, but hasn't forgotten that, for the person across the counter, it might be the first time. The deed transfer is there, dated October 2014, 2 months after Earl's death, executed by the Pikeville attorney, a man named Howard Stratton, now retired, who apparently fulfilled his one obligation to the estate and then stepped back into the bureaucratic wallpaper. The property taxes have been paid from a small account Earl set up specifically for that purpose, a prepaid arrangement that had enough in it to cover approximately 15 years. It has 8 years left. Earl Voss planned for his son not to come back right away. He planned for the land to be waiting regardless. Eldon stands at the counter reading this, and something in his chest does something he doesn't have language for. It isn't grief, exactly, though grief is in it. It isn't gratitude, though that's in it too. It is closer to the sensation of realizing that someone loved you in a more practical, more permanent way than you understood while they were alive, that they translated love into action and let it sit quietly, without fanfare, doing its work in your absence. Don't let anybody talk you out of it, including yourself, the old man might have added, if he'd known what was coming. Sir, Donna's voice brings him back. She is holding a pen and a form, a simple one-page update of contact information. I just need a current address. Eldon looks at the form. The line reads, current mailing address. He doesn't have one. The irony is so complete, it almost makes him laugh. But the laugh stays somewhere in his throat, not quite making it out. Gerald leans in slightly and says, quietly, you can use the post office box. I can set one up for you today, before noon. It's $11 a month. Eldon looks at him. Gerald shrugs. That's what post offices are for. Eldon writes down the P.O. box number Gerald gives him from memory. Gerald already looked up the next available box number that morning, because of course he did, and slides the form back to Donna, who processes it with the brisk efficiency of someone closing a loop that has been open for 6 years. She stamps the file. She makes a copy of the deed. She slides it across the counter in a plain manila envelope, and Eldon takes it with both hands. Congratulations, Donna says, and she means it in the plain, factual way that the word deserves, not celebratory, just accurate. Something that was yours is now confirmed to be yours. Thank you, Eldon says. Outside on Central Street, the October morning is bright and cold, the mountains pressing in on every side, the sky that narrow river of blue running overhead. Gerald and Eldon stand on the sidewalk. Gerald is already checking his watch. He has a route to run. There's a logging road off Route 38 that'll take you to the eastern boundary, Gerald says. I looked it up on the county map. Eldon nods. He's holding the manila envelope against his side. You going to go out there? Gerald asks. Eldon looks down the street, toward the mountains, toward the direction of Cutter's Creek, toward the 200 acres that have been sitting in the eastern hills for 11 years waiting for him to come back. Yeah, he says. I think I am. The logging road off Route 38 is exactly where Gerald said it would be. A dirt track barely wide enough for the F-150, marked by nothing except a gap in the tree line and 2 parallel ruts worn into the earth by decades of machinery that hasn't come through in years. Eldon turns in slowly, the truck rocking over exposed roots and loose stone, the branches closing in on both sides until the road feels less like a road and more like a suggestion. He drives alone. Gerald offered to come, and Eldon said no, and Gerald understood immediately, which is one of the things Eldon is beginning to appreciate about the man. He doesn't require explanation. He just adjusts. The October light comes through the trees in long, angled shafts, the kind of light that makes even ordinary things look like they're being examined carefully. The leaves are at peak color. The eastern Kentucky hills doing what they do every fall, putting on a display so extravagant it seems almost excessive. The reds and golds so saturated they look digital. Eldon drives slowly, not because the road demands it, though it does, but because he is not in a hurry. He has nowhere to be. For the first time in years, that fact feels different than it usually does. The road opens after about a mile into a wide, flat clearing, an old staging area for logging equipment. The ground still packed hard despite years of grass and weed reclaiming the edges. Eldon parks the truck and gets out. He stands still. The land runs out in every direction from where he's standing, rolling upward into forested ridgelines to the north and east, dropping into a creek hollow to the south, where he can hear water moving even from here. 200 acres is a number that means something on paper, and something entirely different when you're standing inside it. It is larger than he expected, and quieter than anywhere he's been in years. A deep, layered silence that isn't empty, but full. The way forests are full, with bird calls and wind in branch and the distant percussion of a woodpecker somewhere in the hardwoods. He walks. There's no path, so he makes one, moving through the high grass of the clearing toward the tree line, his boots finding the earth beneath, solid and cold. The ground has a particular give to it that he remembers from childhood, without knowing he remembered it. The specific compression of Appalachian topsoil, the way it takes your weight and holds it. He used to run on ground like this barefoot in summer. He used to know this texture the way you know the inside of your own house in the dark. He reaches the tree line and keeps going. The forest is old growth in places. White oak and tulip poplar thick enough that two men couldn't ring them with their arms. His father's voice comes back to him, not as memory exactly, but as presence. That white oak marks the northeast corner. He looks for it and finds what might be it. A tree so large and old it seems less like a plant and more like architecture. Its roots climbing out of the earth like buttresses, its canopy spreading wide enough to shade a house. Eldon puts his hand on the bark. He stands there for a long time. This is the moment that the movies would handle badly. The swelling score, the tears running down the weathered face, the triumphant dissolve to a man reborn. Eldon feels none of that. Or rather, what he feels is too complicated and too quiet for that kind of framing. There is something moving through him, yes, but it doesn't feel like victory. It feels more like when you've been holding your breath for so long, you've forgotten you were holding it. And then you exhale. And the exhale itself is neither joy nor relief, but simply the restoration of a natural condition. The return to something that was always supposed to be happening. He thinks about the truck in the Sunoco parking lot. He thinks about the VA portal that hasn't updated in 6 weeks. He thinks about the duffel bag and the 2 changes of clothes and the photograph of a man standing in front of a tree line. He takes the photograph out of his jacket pocket. He brought it without planning to, some instinct loading it into his hand before he left, and looks at it. Earl Voss, maybe 60 in the picture, standing in front of trees that Eldon now recognizes as these trees, this exact tree line, the same cathedral of old-growth timber. His father's face carries the expression Eldon could never quite read when he was young. Not pride, not happiness exactly, but something more fundamental. The look of a man standing on ground he knows belongs to him, and to which he belongs in equal measure. Eldon looks up from the photograph to the trees. The same, exactly the same. He doesn't know what he's going to do. That's the truth he has to stand inside right now, and it's uncomfortable in the way that real truths are uncomfortable. Not dramatic, just present. He doesn't know if he can build something here. He doesn't know if he can afford to, or if his body will cooperate, or if the man he's become in 3 years of parking lots and VA portals and 1.89 coffees is the same man who could learn to live on land again. He doesn't know if home is something you return to or something you rebuild from scratch every time, and whether those two things are even different. What he knows is this: the land is here. It has been here. It waited with a patience that shames him a little and comforts him a lot. He puts the photograph back in his pocket. He sits down at the base of the white oak, his back against the bark, his legs stretched out in front of him on the cold ground. Above him, through the canopy, that narrow river of sky runs blue and infinite. A hawk turns slow circles somewhere up in it, riding a thermal, going nowhere in particular with tremendous grace. Eldon closes his eyes. For the first time in 3 years, he is somewhere. Not parking, not waiting, not surviving in the thin margin between what he needs and what the world has decided to offer him. He is on his land. He doesn't know yet what that means, but he stays there in the silence, letting the question breathe. The way his father taught him to respect the land, not by answering it, but by being present to it long enough that it might, in its own time, answer you. The hawk circles. The creek moves through the hollow below. The white oak holds.